So today, what I really wanted us to do is take further from where we left off last class, where we talked about negotiating tactics, or tactics to be more clear about whether it's negotiation or interpersonal communication. Now I want to take that a little bit further, and the title of today's module is going to be presentations and let me, hold on, I wrote it down.
Hi. Hi, Naima. Hi, sorry I'm late.
Oh, it's okay, no worries. I'm actually pulling up my notes now. Perfect. So the title of the presentation of my, the module today is going to be persuasion and presentation. And I want to show you how to craft a presentation and different tactics to be more effective at persuasion.
I didn't understand.
1 second, I'm sorry. My phone started talking to me. I thought about how best to do this because, look, we could spend an entire 7 series on just persuasive speaking, so to speak. So I thought about what to share here so it doesn't overlap, let's say, too much with next week, which is the capstone, which is that, public speeches as people think of, so to speak. So today, I want to talk about how speaking kind of goes into the arena of whether it's legal arguments or presentations. So I'm going to show you a few presentations that, well, really 2 videos in particular, but one that's a presentation. He is a person who speaks globally, sort of behind a podium, but I want you to see a more relaxed setting, almost like a TED Talk, if you will, except not, but that sort of vein. So you get a sense of, again, how people are doing presentations. Again, we're getting to that capstone, which is next week, which is the overall public speeches as people think about. Last week, we covered one-to-one communication or more of interpersonal communication. This is sort of that in between. Because even when I was putting together some of the material that I wanted to share today, I'm like, well, these are really speeches that I kind of wanted to show you. So forgive me that it might have, it might still sound like a speech, so to speak, but I do think there's a distinction between, the grand public speech, which is what we're going to go over next week, that public oratory, and then that sort of mid-size. There's maybe a room full of people, and walking in and turning on a persuasion. That's what we're talking about today. So is that clear, kind of that point of distinction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I want to start with kind of just questions. I know we've gone over a lot thus far. I know I've showed you a lot. So let me just open up and start with that. Are there any questions that maybe I haven't answered or comments that you'd just like to share?
I think I'm good.
Okay. So the 2 things I had in mind, and I think it was you, Rahima. I don't know. I literally had you on my mind with this particular question, which is how to be more concise. I know several of you mentioned that, but I know you kept going back to that. And I'm almost positive that was you that said that. I want everybody to be thinking about that here. Part of persuasion is having an on-target, tight, clear message. And we talked about that before, but we're coming back to that. Conciseness is a outgrowth of having a clear, understood message of what you want to say. That's really an outgrowth. So instead of me starting from how can we be more concise, I want to start from what is the message, how do you fine tune that message, and how do you be very clear about that message? If you have that, then you don't have to go on and on and on. Generally, when people ramble, I'm talking about, it's because they're not clear in their mind what they want to say, right? You know what you want to say. Somebody asks you a question, that's the end of it. Somebody asks you your address, it's not a 2-minute answer. That's the address, and that's it. Now, if they ask you something that maybe you're not clear about, That's what lends itself to going on and on and on. And typically when you ramble, you go off subject or you bring up a bunch of other things. And that's what I want to help you prevent you from doing. We're going to do it a little bit interestingly today. I know we've already covered entertainers in a sense. We've talked about how that's transferred. I want to show you a video about messaging. We're just going to start with messaging. And we're going to talk about that video. And then I want to get into, you know, what are the ways that people do and things that people do to be more persuasive? Let me just pull up and make sure. Any questions thus far on what I just covered?
Sorry, Darrell, you said, what do people do to get their message across?
Yes.
Okay.
What are people doing? Remember, each week now we've been doing some tips, some best practices, but now, you know, how are people, you know, what are things that people do to be persuasive? And I want you to think now lawyers, business presenters, people that walk in a room and they just like know how to sort of own it and things that they can do. That's what we're talking about here today. Persuasion and presentation.
Yay, that's what we want to do.
Yay, exactly. So before I play you this is what I want you to write at the top of your paper. I really actually would like you to write it. What I want you to write is, and I'll explain to you later what this is. When I am finished, my audience will ... When I am finished speaking, when I'm finished speaking, my audience will ... So, you know, spoiler alert here, I want you to be thinking about every time you walk in a room, that's the first question I want you to ask yourself. When I finish talking, what do I want them to do? Before we get into what are you going to say for 20 minutes? What is the outline going to be for 3 pages? What do you want them to do? What is my point? What is my objective? My objective here today for the next 90 minutes is to show you tips and best practices to be better at using your persuading skills. That's my clear objective. That's what I want to do. I know in my mind what I want to do. I have some notes planned out. I don't have everything written exactly like I want to say. I have a framework, but I know what I want to say. So let me start with this video. This is actually a commercial, but I will talk later about why we're actually starting with a commercial. And just tell me when you can see this pull up.
Yep.
Okay.
The day the world stopped.
Can everybody hear that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna start one more time.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go. Lost together, we discovered ourselves again. And we realized that the things that matter deserve time. From now on, we're not going to leave anything on our plates. because we've learned to savor the moments that were always there. And they never tasted this good.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Had anybody seen that commercial already?
No.
Okay. So I'm calling a commercial. What it is, it's a message. I mean, that's all commercials are. It's an advertisement, an advertisement, it's a message. So what did you get from that? I mean, I mean, why did I show that? I mean, what's happening there? Let's start here. What's the message?
Together.
Sharing.
Okay.
Sharing.
Sharing, okay.
Together.
Together.
I got to appreciate what you have, like the acknowledgement that you can, appreciate what you already have.
Okay, so whoever put together that, whoever created that, when they're sitting in the room, at the end, when I am finished speaking, so in that case, when the video is finished speaking, I want my audience to, or my audience will ... What are they filling in? What was their intention there?
Buy Coca-Cola.
Okay, so how is Coca-Cola though? What does that have to do with sharing, togetherness, anything that y'all just talked about?
It brings people together.
What brings people together?
The Coke.
Okay, that's what they hope. I mean, that's their thinking.
Yeah.
Food, socializing
Okay.
brings people together. Sharing.
So what you see is this is a message around sharing, family, feel good. Pay attention to how it felt. Do you know the language that song was in, that they were singing?
No.
Okay, neither do I. Who knows what the words were? I don't know, but it makes you feel good, right? I mean, all of it was picked. The song, the way that everything happened. Now, this is what I thought was interesting, that this is a messaging about togetherness, which is clearly supposed to be about where we are as a world today. But what did you notice was not in the video? That's now a part of our everyday world seems to be as a result of COVID. And notice they didn't mention COVID.
Cell phone.
Not
Masks.
that, because I don't think that's new because of COVID.
Masks.
Yeah, protective gear. Why do you think maybe they left that out? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the producers here, but I'm just guessing. Why do you think maybe they didn't talk about that?
I think maybe the message could endure beyond this and could have applicability in future as well. So if they were to limit it to today's situation, then it would just be relevant to a particular time.
I think that's a good instinct, but I think taking it, yeah, so I think that's it. But I also think it doesn't put you in a same feel-good space. I mean, look, maybe 40 years from now, public perception will be different and you look at a mask and your heart warms, but I don't think that's where we are now. Remember, we talked about persuasion last week. And remember, he said that there was a certain shop that he got more of participation or engagement from women. And what shop was that he was standing in front of?
A flower shop.
Yeah, because he was trying to make the point that science sort of shows, or that people's perception toward flowers already, women's perceptions in particular, made them more susceptible to be engaged. Susceptible is not a good word, but more likely to engage. I'm bringing it up to say somebody sat in the back and thought, we want to message togetherness. We want to message where we are today and talk about that. So they particularly picked graphics and images that they thought would make you feel that way and omitted those that they thought wouldn't. I think it's a conscious reasoning why there weren't masks. I think there's a conscious reason why you keep seeing babies in the picture, and it's hugs, and it's food, and it's all these different types of people that are coming together. And, you know, I think all of that is done for a clear reason. The reason I wanted to bring that up in the beginning is the same way you watch a commercial. Have you ever watched a commercial and when it's over, it's like, okay, what was that about? And more commercials are
Often.
like that now. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lisha.
Often these days.
And I think that's because what people realized was to cut through the noise, you couldn't just have a kitsch cliche commercial. So the downside of trying to find innovative ways to get your attention is that they may have gotten your attention actually, but then when it's over, what do they want you to do? So I wanted to show a commercial, so to speak, because of the same way that crafter, developer, producer, whatever you want to call it, is thinking intentionally behind that 60 seconds, 90 seconds, in some cases 15 seconds. That's how you want to walk in a room and think intentionally about what you're saying as far as persuasion. Because it's the same thing, the same way you do a 90-second commercial. In fact, when people come to me and say, I have 30 minutes to do a speech, my thinking is, let's prepare for 1 minute. Because if we can talk for 1 minute clearly, concisely, and exactly what I want to say, then we can get to the 30. But if we start at 30, then it might be a big problem. Remember, I told you week 1, I want to use all of my words to drive a few points rather than using a lot of words to express a lot of different points. All right. So what do you want to say? So let me break down the three things I want to kind of get on with today. Creating the message, illustrating the message, and then honing the message. So the first is creating the message. What do I want to say? And creating an outline. So let's talk about that for a second. So the first of is, what do I want to say? What is my message? I'm gonna go back to the Coca-Cola video. I think the message, y'all are all right. Togetherness, hope, family, all that. But ultimately the goal was, because remember, I want to start from the beginning. I don't want us to get this mixed up. The goal is to get you to buy Coca-Cola. So it's like this. They want you to feel good and all fuzzy and all that, but then they want you to go make a purchase at some point when it's all said and done. Knowing that everything that they are choosing down to the very end, when to place their logo, is being driven by that point. It's important to remember the goal at the very beginning. So if I'm walking in and I'm giving a business presentation, or if I am just walking into a room to speak generally about something that I feel strongly about, whatever it is, I want to be clear on what do I want to say. I've been in rooms before where I was rambling because I just didn't know what I wanted to say. What do I want to say? What would I encourage you to do? Write that down. Whatever it is for you, write that down. Just like I told you at the top of that paper, at the end of this, I want my audience to, I would write that. And then under that, because I'm gonna give you 3 points, the first would be, I would write, what do I want to get across? So the first, of course, what the call to action is, that's the overall. When I know that, I need to know what do I need to say and how do I need to make them feel? That commercial had 2 things. What do I need to say and how do I want to make them feel? They said some things that were important, but it's more about how you felt at the end of it. That's where the music came in. That's where the imagery came in. So when you're walking into a room and you're thinking, I want you to be thinking about, first of all, what do I want? Okay, what's the overall goal? What I want them to do? When I know that, I'm going to reverse engineer it. What do I want to say and how do I need to make them feel to get to that place?
So it's what I want to get.
Sorry, go
And
ahead.
then, sorry, it's what I want to get, and then what do I say and how do I make them feel in order to get it?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to think about that from the very beginning strategically. Some people, remember, we talked last week about negotiating, buying decisions, so to speak. People have to feel at ease. Not all the time. Some people make buying decisions. A lot of people do actually, and stressful and pressured and all that. But there are some people, even when the message is right, if they just feel wrong. Remember we talked about pitch, pace, pause. Somebody talked too fast, or maybe they talked down to them. They just didn't like the feel of it. It just didn't feel right. We've all been in a situation where it sounded good, but it didn't feel right. That's what I want you to know. It's two things happening here. Persuasion is not just about what I'm saying. It's not just that I walked in the room and said it. It's also, how do I need to make them feel? Lawyers definitely are thinking about this. That's why they raise their voice suddenly when they want to make a point. Because you're startled. You don't even know what the heck they said. You just, oh, wow. You just realize that they're mad and now you're a little ruffled too. That guy over there, you look and you don't even know the person, but you hate him too. Why not? I mean, you know, so it's the feel. It's not just what I'm saying. It's how do I want to make it feel? And look, commercials play on it all the time. Advertising plays on it all the time. Marketers play on it all the time. They know that it's not just your rational mind. It's not just your so-called, you know, intellectual brain that's making the decisions. It's that limbic part of your brain, they call it. It's that emotive part that's making decisions. And it's very clear that I know not just what do I want to say, but how do I want to make people feel? And that's even going to go down to, you know, the stage that I set. Remember, we're not forgetting anything we talked about before. Remember, we talked about, should have been week 4, 6 areas of communication. I'm looking at each of those areas. I want to look at each of those areas, and that's going to help me be intentional. Once I know, okay, so when I know this is what I want my audience to do, how I dress, right? Remember we talked about pitch, pace, pause for nonverbal areas, and then for the verbal areas where dress, demeanor, body language. I'm thinking of all of that. And this doesn't mean, I mean, we're all humans. It doesn't mean, you know, you don't make mistakes here and whatever. But the fact that I'm intentional about it and thinking about it from the beginning, what music do I come out to? All of that makes a difference. I mean, when you're watching a movie the next time, or even a show, notice how the music will let you know how you're supposed to feel. All right. Questions on this? So what do I want to say? Part of that bullet point is I want you to write an outline. I think it's always good to write some level of outline. What does this do? Let's go back to the question of how do you get over nervousness? Well, I think you always be a bit of nervous, period, when you're doing something. But how do you overall do it? Having an outline helps. Having some level of preparation. We're going to get to preparation. That's the third point. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But starting with that writing of the outline, I guess it's all preparation in some sense. But I think writing the outline. When I say writing the outline, for me, I'm not writing exactly what I want to say. What I'm writing again is, what are those bullet points? What are the 3 things? What are the 5 points? What are the 6 keys? You know, what are those things? What's that overall message? You have to write what works for you in your outline. Don't put something, don't go according to somebody else's because that may not work for you. But the point of the outline is not so much to capture the words, but to capture the message. Because if I get the message, then I know the words. Remember the difference between memorizing and learning. If somebody asks you your address, you've learned that. You haven't just memorized it, because I can ask you in many different ways. I can ask you for directions from many different places, and you could probably still get me there because you know the actual place. I'm making an analogy here. When I know my messaging and not just the words, even if I forget the words, even if I forgot a bullet point, even if when I walked in, I realized, you know what, I have prepared for one speech, and this is a total different place that I'm sitting in now. That's fine, because I've already done some level of preparation, because I've already done some level of thinking. I can pivot more easily than someone else who just walks in and figures, well, I'll figure it out when I get there. Or someone who says, I'm just going to focus on thinking about the words and not all those other pieces that's going to go into place. So I write an outline. Generally, what I do with an outline, and look, let me just pull this up here so you see in real time. Because I'm actually working from an outline now. You use what works for you. In this case, I'm just using something on my phone. This is you see that's like an app function. And I just typed in, I can type in notes, and then that's what I'm actually going through now. And I just want you to see, that's my outline. And as you can see, so I just want you to see how I did it. I put the 3, is that clear? Like have a outline, stick to it, those 3 points. I know it's a little fuzzy, sorry. But the point I'm trying to make is do what works for you. I'm not into this is the outline you should work with, because everybody's different. You have to do what works for you, but have something. That again gives me, remember, and I consider myself to be seasoned. Look, you can just look back at this. When I first started, remember I said the title of this presentation is Persuasion, and I look down. See, that helps because it's written. I'm not just gonna go off of the fact that I think I'm a gifted orator. I literally have forgotten my own notes, which was, the actual title was Persuasion and Presentation. But that's an example, again, of little tips to how to reduce nervousness. I have no problem with, if I'm speaking, especially in a more conversational style, let's say I'm in a room, everybody has their phone with them. I'm fine having this. So let's say I forget a point. I have no problem saying, you know what, I forgot, hold on 1 second. That's fine though. You see what I mean? Those are little things that you can do. I don't want you to feel like you see somebody speak without notes, so you walk in a room and try to do that and you mess yourself up. No, do what feels comfortable. You can put it on an iPad. There's little things I see now people do, and they're carrying that around. If that makes you feel comfortable, then do that. But I do think it's key to have an outline, something you can go back to. So I may have even lost my place. Even if I'm talking and I forget right now and I lose where I am, I know my point is have an outline and stick to it. That's what I'm talking about. So I can't go but so far off because I kind of know where I want to go with that, all right? Also, when I have my outline, it allows me to stick to it more easily. Every time you walk in a room, there's going to be something unexpected. So I was reading something that they said, a good communicator goes into a room and tries to figure out where the surprises will be. A great communicator knows there are going to be surprises and just already prepares herself for it. And that's what I was saying. There's going to be surprises. You'll walk in, maybe they now won't have the mic, or maybe, I've been in where they said, maybe you prepare for one thing and then they come and they say, oh, you remember that group that we said was going to be here? That group actually couldn't make it, so it's a different group now. Okay, whatever that is, if I have an outline, if I kind of know what I want to say, even if I want to pivot from it, I have some strict kind of points of what I want to go over. Because that's the other thing too. What do I want them to leave with? When I listen to people and either they don't have 7 keys to success or 3 points or something like that, and they're just going on and on and on, generally, I think in my mind, they probably haven't thought, what do I want them to leave with? Like, I want you to leave with knowing, we've talked about 3 different ways: how to create the message, how to hone the message, we haven't gotten to hone yet, and how to prepare the message. When you kind of think, not just from the level of this, from the perspective of the speaker, the communicator, the presenter, but you think as the listener, what do I want them to walk away with? You always come away. You always make a better, communicate better. You always do. Because now you're thinking about, what are they hearing? Not what am I saying? What are they hearing? I mean, messaging is, messaging is everything. So that's that point. Let me see where we're on time. Okay, good. Let's move to the second one. So we have that outline. Something that I want you to have an outline, a tangible one, something that you carry with you, put it on your phone, digitize it, or write it if you want it. Something that kind of is saying, what do I want them to get from this presentation? That's going to help me stick to it. That's creating the message. Second one, I said hone the message. Second one is illustrate the message. How do I illustrate the message? So I want you to tell me, what are the ways in which a person can illustrate their message?
Stories or analogies.
Okay, that's one way. I actually didn't even have that down here, but that is a way. Actually, I did. I have analogies, so. But that's the lowest level. Why is that the lowest level? Because I can't see the story, right? I can't see it.
It's spoken still.
It's still speaking. So what are some other ways that I can be visual, that I can show you, that I can illustrate my message? What did I do in this class today? What did I do last week? What have I been doing every week, I think?
You show us
Videos.
videos.
Yeah. If I can show you a video, I'm gonna show you a video. So this is how I put it in levels. Analogies, so I would put / stories, I guess, Rahima. Next would be props. Next would be graphics. That includes anything you can see. And the last would be videos. That's the highest level. If I can show a video, oh, absolutely. It's nothing like video footage. Video does it every time. If you can show a video in your presentation, or a slide, or a graph. So let's not even say video, a graph. If I want to show numbers, just yesterday, one of the companies that I'm working with, I was showing them that we exceeded a goal that they had. They had a fiscal goal that they wanted us to reach, and we've reached it by, 2 times as much. It was one thing for us to just say it, but I was like, no, we need to take this to PowerPoint because I want you to see. That makes a difference. I found even in my own career with sales, if I can show a presentation visually, my ability to close is going to be a lot more. It's one thing for me to tell you the numbers. It's one thing for me to tell you, even after, let's say, I've shown you some success. So one of the things that I do with consulting is we work with companies with recruitment. We do a pilot with them. Sometimes even after the pilot, they've seen the success. When I say seen, like their business is working, it's working, but that extra push a lot of times is still, let's sit down and let me show you numbers. Let me show you what we've done over the past month. Believe it or not, that makes a difference just for them to see it. Excuse me. So whenever you can illustrate your message, let me back up. You should always illustrate your message. So if I can't get a video, I'm gonna get a prop or a chart. And if I can't do that, then I'll just use a story. So you always have to think about how to illustrate it. The great speakers can illustrate it in your mind without you physically seeing it because they can use their words to paint that picture, to set that scene. But in every level, the visualization still is making the difference. Go back to the Coca-Cola commercial. Coke kept coming up. They kept showing it, that red label. As a matter of fact, that was one of the only things in that video that was red. They wanted you to see that. You were not going to miss that. You were visually, you could see the babies and the hugging and all that. But really what they wanted you to make sure that you saw was that logo. Even if you notice at one point, one of the bottles had fallen over and it spilled, all of that was to draw your attention where they wanted you to see it. Remember we showed you Jennifer Hudson and she was singing in the beginning and she was still and then she moved her arm? She's illustrating. That body movement is an illustration. It's literally telling the story. Remember the speaker at the very beginning that we looked at who talked about a third grade dropout, his gesticulating with his hands, all of those things. It was meant to visually take you to a place. And then of course, he told the story. He told the story.
I have a question.
Of course.
So I'm just trying to link this back into what we learned in previous weeks, like about dress, demeanor, body language and that. And if this, so like I think you made the point where you need to emphasize sort of what you want to express and then you need to omit the stuff that you don't really want to show. So if you were to do it like with respect to those kinds of elements like dress, demeanor, and body language, like maybe there's something within your demeanor that you want to hide or whatever, like how would you apply this principle to that?
Okay, so I think I hear you saying, how can you use your body language to be more persuasive? Maybe there are things that you do that you don't want to emphasize, or things that you don't do that you do. Okay, I think the start of it is being aware. Remember, week 1, I talked about being self-aware. This is important. You have to know, look, you know the old saying, no matter where you go, you bring you. No matter what presentation I share with you about or what style, you have to know you. Remember I told you, like with me, when I'm in front of a lot of people and my hands typically shake, and I don't think it's so much nerves, I just get excited. I know that about me. So I ask for a lavalier mic. Sometimes it's not a hands-free mic, but I know that. Now, usually once I get in it, I'm fine, but you have to know. So I think the start of it is, I know the start of it is being aware of yourself. Where are your own personal shortcomings and strengths? When you know that, so I'll share this. I've actually never shared this before. So I wear contacts, and my vision since I was a kid has really not been the best. I believe that my not so great vision has actually added to me being a great speaker. I would like to think of myself as a great speaker. I don't want to be humble here, but an effective speaker. And I'll tell you why. Because even as a kid, I could not see things from afar off as other people could. I couldn't see notes even in front of my paper the way other people could. So I had to remember things and learn them quicker. So that's a disadvantage that became an advantage. There's a guy named David Bowie. He is one of the most effective lawyers in the United States now. And he was actually profiled in Malcolm Gladwell's book, David versus Goliath, where he talks about how disadvantages can be advantages. He's actually, dyslexic. And because he's so bad at reading, he's had to remember everything. And it's actually, that gift is part of what's made him one of the best lawyers in the country. So I'm just bringing that up to say, even the things that can seem like, because I wanted to get to that point where you say hi, even the things that are not so maybe stellar points about yourself, be aware of those, because those can actually lead to advantages.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes. So how do I want to illustrate the message? And this is something, and before I move to the third point, this is something that is becoming bigger now, I think, because of the availability of technology. I would have taught this course before. I wouldn't have done nearly as much video, but what we would have done is, if we were face to face, more of you practice speaking. I want you to practice, and we'll all critique it. But what I've learned from this is, well, not just I've learned, the way we've infused videos, even when I go back to doing live, we have to do just as many videos. So I'm just making the point of how the videos because some of the techniques I feel like I've been able to share with y'all have been easier than in other times that I've shared it, because the video makes it so clear. So just like it was easy for you maybe to pick up some things that I've shared from the video, be clear on that when you're doing presentations. It may not be a video, again, it may be a prompt, it may be a chart, it may just be a sign. Videos and messages tell stories. Excuse me, the graphics tell stories. All right, third one. So create the message, illustrate the message, and the last is hone that message. How do you hone it? Prepare. Practice. Practice makes perfect. I believe that you should always prepare for a presentation. I think I told you this week 1. If you can get in the room and practice there, I mean, I know now we're living in weird times, but you know, when things are normal or somewhat normal again, if you can get in the room and do it, do that. That's how I would do. If I'm preparing for something and they say, what's going to be in that room? I'd like to walk in the room. I just want to see it. I want to feel it. Practice. This goes back to the question, how can I reduce nervousness? How can I be more persuasive? The more things that I can tick off of my uncertainty box, the better my presentation is going to go. Every time. Every time. So I'm going to give you a little simple point that law enforcement does. And this is done because I want to give you of how important it is. Just being prepared makes a difference. So one of the techniques that law enforcement is taught with interrogation is that if they walk in a room, for instance, no matter where a person is sitting, so let's say they have a suspect or a person of interest sitting in a room. So the person may be sitting in a room, of course, suspense is building, they're waiting to see, you know, what's going to transpire. Well, a common tactic of law enforcement is to walk in the room, no matter where that person is sitting, they say, oh, can you sit over here? And they have them switch their seat. It seems so harmless, you know, can you sit there? And then they sit wherever that person was sitting, or they sit somewhere else, but just to get that person to move. The point of that is what? Why do you think law enforcement would do that? That no matter where the person is sitting, when they walk in, just when they start off, they say, oh, can you slide over here or sit right here?
Well, because you said that previously that the person would feel more comfortable if they were already accustomed to that situation. So then you're taking that level of, I suppose, comfortability away. So the person's not, yeah.
Exactly. And the next time you see that, if you catch that, if you watch a police video or whatever, check that out. That's persuasion. At the very beginning, it's getting them a little bit uneasy. And I'm only saying that to say the opposite effect is when you walk in the room and I know what's going on. That's why I'm making the point of the effective speakers, they're practicing. They're finding out how the room is positioned, all those things that even if some things change, so let's say now I do have to move a seat or I do have to move, you know, the podium, or let's say maybe I'm not using a mic. That's fine because I have some other variables that I know of what's going on. The more variables that I know, ultimately, I'm gonna be able to make a better presentation. And think about it this way. Some people walk in, they don't know their message, they don't know the audience, and they don't have a clear grasp on the venue. So clearly it's gonna fall apart because those are the three things we're talking about. You have to have a clear, because you might have good messaging, but if I don't know my audience, right? And I don't know the venue, it might still fall flat. And I can have the message and I can have the audience, but if I'm not clear on the venue, and when I say venue, that makes a difference in the sense of, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a presentation and I felt like there were things outside of me that were going to affect it, like the mic having bad sound feedback. I don't care how good it is that you're speaking. Once the person is annoyed about the mic, they can't even receive from you. You see how all of those things make a difference. And I have done, and I will do this. And usually when something like that happens, I will call that out in the middle. Hey, I need another mic, or let me just say this without the mic. Because I've been communicating professionally long enough that I realize things like that will turn it off. Even when, again, I know my audience and I know that message, still it's that third bucket. It's that venue. And that's where sometimes just unforeseen circumstances come into play. And if I don't know those things, it's easier for me to get thrown off course. So how do I practice? I'm always practicing. The more you practice, you know, it's a saying we have here in America, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And that's exactly how we say it, you know. And if you are consistently practicing, if you consistently have the message, I feel like right now somebody can drop me in the middle of Timbuktu to talk about how you can succeed through tough times, because that's just who I am. And I've done enough messages on that I have a core, and everything that's coming is coming out of that graph, but I have that core already. But that's not with everything. I would be silly to think that I can, just because I have a gift to speak, then I'm persuasive on everything. If I don't know the messaging and I haven't prepared, I don't know. But these things, even the things that seem like I'm speaking off the cuff, I'm prepared. You see what I mean? You know, there's been notes that's been in play. And the more you prepare, the better you get. I mean, how serious are you? Do you want to be prepared? If you want to really get serious, record yourself. You know, that's what I would do to get, and I still do. I mean, obviously, I will record. I watch each of these. Every session that we do, I watch them later. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. Oh, wait a minute, I left that story off. Well, oh, wait a minute, what was I saying there? But I feel like if I were to teach this class next year, this time, I guarantee I'd do it better than now. Why? Because one is practice. I'm looking back. I want to transmit or convey to you, I'm not just resting on the fact that I'm a good communicator. And I am a naturally gifted communicator. But I meet people who aren't naturally gifted and you haven't prepared. I'm thinking you really are setting yourself up for failure. You have to prepare. So I created that message. So I have a clear outline. I know what my outline is. I have a sense of what I want to say. I know what I want from the very beginning. Then how do I illustrate that message? What is it that I want to, whether it's props, what's behind me? Even as simple as this, you know, all of that, what's behind, all of that is setting the message. I was on a Zoom call recently and it was a great guy, wonderful guy, but his dog kept getting in the video. I mean, and the dog is licking, and we're in a fairly serious, I thought it was fairly serious, you know, and we're recording this and the dog is jumping up and he's like, you know, my puppy, and I couldn't get off on the dog. And look, we're on a professional call. So I'm just saying, I see you, Lishay, laughing, but those are the things, you know, it's almost like when I would do those employment readiness workshops and people would say, why does it matter what I dress as long as I'm smart? And I go into but that's not the world we live in. The world we live in is that presentation matters. What's behind me matters. I feel like I'm just as smart, right? But if I woke up and I had a tank top in here and I'm like, I'm gonna talk to you about speaking, you probably would be a little offended about my tank top. You know, so all of those, so illustrate. And then lastly, practice. And the more I practice, the more I do, the better I'm gonna get. That's what I love about watching politicians. Whether you agree with their politics or not, they get better over time. If you made a stump speech 10 times for a year straight, you get better too. You know which zingers ring with the crowd. You know when to make your pauses. You start to anticipate when people laugh. All of that comes with doing it more and more and more and knowing, and this is what I want to say too about practicing, knowing that you're going to give some presentations that are going to do well, and you're going to do some that aren't going to do well. You're going to do some that you aren't going to think did well, and people are going to love it. And you're going to do something you're going to thought knocked it out of the park. And you walked out and people were like, that was cute, but oh well. So you know that in your mind already. You don't take it too personal. You know, you just know that's part of the game. So I have something else I want to show you. But of course, I want to open up first. Questions, comments. I have much more I want to share, but I do want to at least pause there.
How long should you be preparing for stuff? Like if your presentation is a week ahead, is that too short a period to prepare? Or I suppose you shouldn't be leaving it for the night before.
Oh, you can. I mean, I wouldn't. Look, my answers might be a bit unconventional. Late is better than never always, right? So I'm never going to say if it's even an hour before not to do it. I really can't say when is best to start. I think you start when you have the idea, you know, especially if it's something you're passionate about. You don't really see it as a chore to start. You're already thinking about things to say. You may be in the shower thinking about, hey, I maybe put these words together. So I think it's a continuous thing. I will say quite the contrary to this night before. I've practiced, and then the night before maybe said something and it changed everything. Maybe because it's something someone said. So I think you be nimble. you be nimble enough to change as it goes on. But yeah, I can't really answer that question. I can't really answer that question as far. Practice often though, I will say that. The more you do, the better you're gonna get. And especially if you're recording, you're watching it, you have people that are watching it, you're open to watching things on YouTube, seeing intentional things people are doing, all of those things are gonna make the difference. All right, so let me pull this up before I have some tips I wanna give you, but before I give you tips, let's watch this next video. So this is again, this is messaging. This is this is not a religious message, but he is a religious figure, so to speak, here in America, well, globally. And he is sharing some things. This is it's 8 minutes, but we'll go 6 minutes. And again, this is his normal delivery. That's why I picked him specifically. His normal delivery is that high impact. And as a matter of fact, he speaks to over 1 million people live, but I wanted you to see a seated approach, more of a presentation rather than a public speech, but yet you're seeing these same principles at play. And I want you to notice the similarities with the Coke video, because we're gonna go back to what's the message, what's the call to action, and what are some things that you notice. And I want you to notice what's persuasion, so all of those things I want you to be pointing out in this video, all right? Let's, okay. All right, so. Everyone can see this screen, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Crushing, God turns pressure into power. And I was thinking how last time you were here, you wrote soar.
Yeah.
S-O-A-R. It's
Yeah.
like eagles on the cover and play.
Yeah.
And now we're on crushing.
Yeah.
So
And
what happened?
They say, one is not diabolically opposed to the other. For the eagle, soar is about flying, but for the eaglet, soar is about falling. If the eagle stirs her nest and the eaglets are pushed out of the comfort of their nest, is that not crushing? If their food supply is now cut off and they are pushed out by their own mother to fall off the side of a cliff, is that not crushing? Why would mama do that to me? Why would mama not feed me? And in the process of the eaglet falling, flapping its wings in hysteria, it is the thing that crushed the eaglet that causes it to soar.
Wow.
The whole value of crushing is to explain to people not to be confused when the crushing precedes a soaring. Because a lot of times, if we only tell you about soaring and we don't tell you about crushing, when something crushing happens in your life, it looks like what we preached is not true. Whereas crushing is the process and soaring is the promise. You cannot have promise without process. And we live in a time where people preach more about the promises and less about the process. You are going home and dealing with marital issues, children who won't obey or comply, a sister who doesn't like you, a father who always preferred the other sister or daughter, and you're saying, how is my life in such shambles? Never realizing that those that God is going to anoint the most, he always crushes the most severely. The problem we have today is that people want a success for which they have not been groomed for. Success that you have not been groomed for is like birthing a baby prematurely. the chances of survival go down the earlier the baby is exposed. And to be exposed too soon is not a blessing, it's a curse. You don't want anything before it's time. Nothing before it's time. There's a time and a season for every purpose under heaven. The first time I went to the mic to preach, my hands were shaking so bad that when I held the mic, I was nervous when I picked it up, but when I knew that they could see that I was nervous, that made it worse. So it was kind of like a tambourine or something, you know. So the next time I had them adjust the height of the mic. I didn't quit preaching. I had them adjust the height of the mic and put my hands behind my back so they couldn't see my hands. And I preached the first 5 or 10 minutes with my hands behind my back until enough anointing came, because when the anointing comes, the fear goes. And then I took the mic and started preaching. You cannot let your fear hold you back from your destiny. You have to feel the fear and do it anyway. Do it broke, do it scared, do it nervous, do it trembling, do it on your knees, do it with help, do it on crutches, do it in a wheelchair, because you don't want to end up in a nursing home sitting on a bedpan wondering what would have happened if you'd only had more courage. I was doing research for my book and I found out that the same part of the brain that processes physical pain processes emotional pain. So my brain doesn't know whether my heart is broken or whether you stabbed me in the leg. The same part of the cerebellum that sends the message that you're in pain is just as intense about a broken heart as it is about a stabbed leg. You understand? So all of a sudden I'm in trauma, but there's no paramedic because I'm not bleeding. I'm not being crushed on the outside where you could put a tourniquet on it and send me to the emergency room. I'm being crushed in my heart. I'm being crushed by failed expectations. I'm being crushed by the fact that I'm older now and I thought I would be further than I am, and I am not. God has a whole lot of ways to crush you. I'm being crushed by bankruptcy. I'm being crushed by disappointment. I'm being crushed because I love somebody who won't love me back. I'm being crushed because I have a child who disrespects me. There are all kinds of ways for you to be crushed in places that people don't see, and it affects you like you are being stabbed. This trauma of the soul cannot be treated in the hospital. This trauma of the soul, this secret crushing that God allows us to go through sometimes in our life are beyond explanation. And yet there's not a person in this room, young or old, black or white, rich or poor, intellectual or illiterate, who escapes it. You cannot live in this world and not need what I'm talking about. You cannot live in this world and not need it. Something in your life is going to be what God uses to crush you. But remember that crushing is not the end. My spirit, God said, I want you to go tell my people that crushing is a stage, it's not a destination.
Okay, we'll stop there just because for sake of time. Okay, so what did you think? Not so much about what he was saying, but the delivery.
He used the points which you've gone over in the previous week. So he's and which you spoke about earlier. He's paused for effect. He raised his voice. He uses his hands and body language. He asked a question, not the why. He did use the why question, but he also asked the what question. So he's using all those tactics to deliver a message and keep person interested. He used illustrations as opposed to video.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you noticed all those things. Notice how he has a message. So what was at the top of his paper? if he wrote it. When I'm finished speaking, my audience will what?
Will understand crushing.
Okay, and what exactly is crushing? Not so much, were y'all clear that was a book?
My audience will understand that failure is not the end. You can rise from failure.
So true. So, and that was only a snippet. So his book is called Crushing. That's why I kept going back to this. So his message is, well, I think it was deeper than buy the book. I mean, the message was more bigger than that. Was bigger, excuse me, not more bigger. It was bigger than that. But the impetus for him being there is he is promoting this book. So what is his message? The message is, and I think you're hitting on it, get back up from failure. You can be more. Inspiration. He understands clearly. What makes this a great presentation is he understands his audience. Clearly by the applause, he understands them. He gets the venue, he's comfortable, and he certainly knows the message. I picked him specifically because here's someone who you can tell from his style that his normal delivery is, on stage. It is demonstrative. He's dialed it back some, but he's using that same concept. He went there knowing what he wanted to say. Remember we talked about having a message? You don't just want to sit down and say, well, if he asked me about the book. No, he came with specific stories. And he knew, remember we talked about before, stories creating credibility and connection. He knew from the beginning what stories he wanted to tell. And look, maybe he has, that interview is an hour long. Maybe he has 100 stories in his mind and he just chose the ones, I'm sure he's done enough of those where he chooses the ones, but he knows these stories to use, and he uses stories that now connect to the people. Because remember, he takes that one story and says, you can't be afraid to do it. So it starts with him and his hands trembling, but before you know it, he's now brought it to you. And do it, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you're in crutches, or whether you're in, and then, so it's an art to what's happening here. That same way that he's presenting, those same tactics, I believe you can transfer into any presentation and it's going to be effective. And now if he's doing that there, imagine when he does those revivals where it's 1 million people in the audience and he's standing up. Imagine the delivery there. So let me give some specific thoughts here, some specific things that I wrote down. So the first thing is the use of repetition. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, because I want to make sure I get all these in the order. Repetition. So repetition is important because repetition, this goes back to that first thing about creating the message. Repetition lets you and me know that I know what it is that I want to say and I'm clearly on board with it. I know exactly what I came here to do. I came here to talk about Crushing, which is the name of my book. Well, I'm just talking in his case, for instance, and which is the name of his book and the name of this message of getting back up from failure. And because he knew that, now let's make that connection with Coke. Remember the Coke commercial is the same thing. They went in with this idea, we want to create messaging that's going to cause people to identify our brand with love and family and sharing, and thereby want to buy. Same concept. So repetition is important because what repetition is helping you do is stay on topic, and it's helping to continuously be clear about this is what it is that I'm doing. Rule of 3. I always talk about bullet points, 5 bullet points, this, that. I always think 3. It's something about the rule of 3. People like it. It's easy. It's clear. I think 3 is a brilliant thing to use in your speaking. I use 3s most of the time. I'm sure you're catching that with the way that I talk. Even if I use 3 several times in the same presentation. So I might say 3 ways to be successful. And in that first 3, maybe it breaks down to 3 more. I don't know, but people follow 3s easier. 1, 2, 3. And they follow it because you can hold up your fingers. You can actually hold it up. People follow that sort of thing. The first thing I want to talk to you is your mind actually follows it quicker, and thereby you're more persuasive. Questions. We talked last week about the use of questions and interpersonal communication, but that same concept is true. Asking questions to your audience allows people to think. Questions are an important point to throw out. Maybe it was Bill Clinton. No, let me get this right. I think it was Bill Clinton, who was famous for, no. I think it was Ronald Reagan, whose campaign was famous for, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I mean, that captured whoever it was, won that election and is known even today. That was all people remembered. Are you better off? And people thought, because whoever was running against an incumbent president. And so they knew that the key, because sometimes the answer, no pun intended, is not to give people the answer, but it's just to ask the question. And so they realized rather than tearing down the incumbent president and doing all these other things that people might find to be offensive, or that people might think you're trying to lead me to have an opinion on my own and I want my own opinion, they just ask the question. When you are speaking, I think it's always important to at least ask one question. Sometimes it's not a rhetorical question. I mean, just like I do all the time, I ask you, like, what do you think that means? Like it's an actual real question. But sometimes, of course, the larger the group, it's rhetorical, but that's important. How many times have you heard the speech, what are you going to be remembered for? Something like that. It's one thing to say, live life so you can be remembered, but what are you going to be remembered for? Questions cause people to internalize what you're saying. So, not just internalize, but personalize it. That's what you want. So it's no longer something that's a grand thing in the ether, but it's personal for them. Okay, so questions. Fit on a bumper sticker. I have that as a note. Anything, if you want something to be remembered, the shorter is better. There's a reason why slogans and taglines work the way they do. Things that are catchy. Now, notice we went 6 weeks before I got here. Some people start public speaking classes with this being the first thing. I don't, giving you tips to create catchy titles and pithy words to get people's attention. I wanted to not start with that. I do think that that's important. Fitting on a bumper sticker, having catchy words and all that. Those things are important. That's not the core. That's why I didn't start with it. But yes, if you can fit it to fit on a bumper sticker, yes. Alliteration is another thing. People like pitch, pace, pause. It's all P's. That's better than the other 3 that I gave you, which was dress, demeanor, and body language. Body language really doesn't fit there, even though that's the rule of 3. These are little things, but they make a difference. One of the most effective lawyers, I was going to show that here today. I thought about it all the way up till last night, but I said I didn't want to show it because I wanted to be cognizant. I didn't want to be offensive. So I was going to show you a clip of Johnny Cochran during the O.J. Simpson trial. But I know that's such a polarizing trial. I just didn't want to. But I wanted to bring up, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. People remember that. You barely were even born, when that happened. But you've probably heard it, haven't you? See? Look at that. How old were you when that happened? No, you wouldn't.
I didn't know.
You wouldn't have been born. It was 1988.
No, I was 21. No.
Okay,
About
so
92.
oh, excuse me, it was 92. It was 90, something like 92.
Yeah.
You were about 21. How old were you, T?
I was not even born yet.
But I want to bring this up. This is why important this is. You weren't even born, and it happened in an entirely different country. But yet I say the gloves don't fit. You must equip, and you know what I'm talking about. That's the power of messaging. I just want you to know that yes, he's eloquent, and yes, he's got the words, but his use of alliteration and the use of saying things that are catchy. Even some of the jurors said that they were in the back thinking about that glove. Of course, there were a lot of other things happening at that trial, but I just want to bring out the point that certain things you say and the way you say it, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Remember, I explained to you, that was not the first president that said that. Warren Harding said it in the 1920s, but he just wasn't memorable. He didn't use the same effect and all those things. So slogans, words, all of those things make a difference. All of those things are intentional things that you can do to be more persuasive. Because this is the thing. I thought about how do you quantify persuasiveness? This is how I would quantify it. Memorability and movability. That's persuasion. Can I be remembered and can I move people? Now you have to have both. Because you might be memorable. Remember, we talked about the commercials. Commercial may be memorable, but I still may not know what it is at the end. So I haven't been moved. I haven't been moved to a buying decision. But persuasion is also about moving. Some people, they're just good at that. So can you move with the word? The more that I have those two things, that I'm memorable and I'm able to move people, memorable and move people, that's persuasion. And all those things that I've explained, the telling of the story, the intentionality behind the messaging, the illustrating what it is that you're trying to say, the having a theme, that if it can fit on a bumper sticker, putting it on a bumper sticker, repeating it again and again, going back to that point. All of those things are going to drive in what it is that we're conveying. Questions, comments?
When you do repetition, do you ever say, like, as I previously said, or do you rather just say what you were saying previously again? Because, yeah, I just wanted to know how you phrase it. Are you supposed to tell the person that you've already told them this, or do you just continuously say what you want them to say?
Great question. That's actually a really good question. I definitely want to tell them what I told them. So tactic we learned in law school, intro, tell them what you're going to tell them. Body, tell them what you want to tell them. Conclusion, tell them what you already told them. But what's important is that not only do I tell you what I already told you, I tell you that I already told you. Let me answer your question a different way. And I want you to notice this the next time you turn on CNN or any of those international news stations. Have you ever watched it, right? And you're watching, let's say a feed or whatever they're watching, they're showing you a split screen, but then the commentator comes on and says, what you're watching is, and they begin to describe the scene. Now you have to ask yourself, how the heck are you going to tell me what I'm watching? I'm watching it. But that is a subtle tactic. I'm going back to this thing of, it's one thing for me to just wrap up and say it. It's another thing for me to say, remember, we spoke earlier about the 6 key ways to be more effective at speaking. We spoke about earlier how to illustrate the message. So not only am I bringing the point up again, I'm actually reminding you that I shared it with you. Hey, you may have forgotten just that quickly that we went over it, but that is subtly establishing a level of trust, because it's like, oh yeah, maybe he did tell me that. So yes, I do want to tell you, and yes, people do that often, and I'm actually sensitive to that. Like I said, I'm bringing up the CNN example. I'm very sensitive when I'm watching people like, well, what you're watching is, or what I told you was, because sometimes people say that and they really hadn't told you. So you want to be aware of that, because that's a tactic. I've seen that happen. What I shared with you was, and I'm thinking in the back of my mind, you didn't say that, but okay, I'm gonna let you live and let you finish. But no, you didn't, but that's a tactic. So that's just my way of answering. Yes, I definitely want you to go back and sort of button that up. What I shared with you was, remember what we went over was week 1. Notice I look at what I do with you. Usually, I didn't do it this week. Usually I start each week and ask you to tell me what happened last week. I know what happened, I was here. But that's my way of not only bringing it back up, but subtly reminding everybody that that was what I transmitted last week. Right?
Thanks.
Sure. So next week, being the grand finale, who wants to be the one that wants to share their story with us? Remember, I told you at the very beginning, I want you to be thinking about a story. I have not forgotten. So next week, I mean, everybody won't go, but I would like to take volunteers. Who would like to prepare to share a story with us that we can all later critique and criticize and talk about how you can do better?
Can I just ask for a reminder exactly of what our story is supposed to entail?
Any story. After everything we've talked about, you know what a story should be now. I want you to tell us a story that's going to lead to an action. Remember, I told you at the very beginning. Now, I brought you all the way full circle. So now I'm about to use the tactic I told you to use yourself. But I really have. I've shared with you what makes a great story. I've shared with you the themes behind great stories. I've shared with you different ways that people have told stories in singing, in comedy, all these different ways. Now we're bringing this to the very end. And my challenge for you is tell us a story. I don't know what the action is behind it. I don't know what you want us to understand or what you want us to feel, but you need to know that. And you're going to share it with us. I can, of course, call on people on the spot next week, but I figured at least ask for volunteers this way. But you don't have to tell me now. Think about it. Everybody really is on the hook because I would like to hear something from each person because that's what we're coming to. And I was joking at the end about the critique and all of that. I will share some things. It's not about critiquing it so much, but it is with you getting comfortable with just sharing a story.
We have to make a speech. Sorry, I think I missed the instruction.
I don't want you to think about it like a speech. Notice I didn't use that word intentionally because I feel like that's daunting. I just want you to tell us a story. But what is that story? That you notice I've shared with you enough ways that people tell a story. Songs, by lawyers are telling stories, business people telling stories, politicians are telling stories. However you want to tell the story, you tell it. I don't know what your story is. I don't know if it's about your business. I don't know if it's something personal. I don't know if it's an issue you feel strongly about. I don't know. Maybe it's something that happened in your life. Maybe it's something you're moving toward. I don't know what that story is. But that story is going to teach us something and it's going to make us feel something. That's ultimately, I think, what you wanted me to show you how to do. And so next week, we will end with speech making. The things that people are doing that are giving these high impact. Now, this is bringing everything together. Everything we've shared is the foundation. But I want to add some things that maybe wouldn't work on a Zoom or wouldn't work face-to-face, but certainly work on that large stage. The things that people are doing that are reaching people, the ways that people are able to, I mean, this fascinates me. People can give a speech and it can totally shift almost history. I mean, history, the entire history of the early part of the 20th century was written by basically people who use the gift of speaking for nefarious purposes. If you really think of it that way, that's really what it came down to. The entirety of at least the European and American wars came out of not so much bad policy, but speeches that riled people up, rallies, and we'll talk a little bit about that next week too, that group thing, that fact of, and I'll share a bit of my opinion here, that I think that had Corona not happened, someone like a Donald Trump would have had more of an advantage, not just because of the political ramifications of it, but I think rallies tend to go to that emotion, that sort of, we're not even thinking anymore, we're just mad, we're angry. Those rallies push that, where we're no longer even, who cares about policy? We're just all in a room chanting whatever we're chanting. And I think for what it's worth, the shutdown and the fact that we didn't have those large rallies and people were at home, I think that added a different dynamic to the campaigning. And that's important for you to recognize, because speeches have that power as well. When you walk in, and I'm kind of giving you a preview for next week because we have literally 3 minutes. When you're walking in a room, whether it's a big speech, a small speech, a lot of people are not, how other people receive it is also felt in that room. I learned this early on when I would go and make presentations, and I learned in schools that if the cool kids didn't sit up and watch the speech, that would affect everybody else. So I had to learn in the beginning to capture their attention. Sometimes it would be to say something outright to them. Oh, no, you're gonna have to sit up. You ain't gonna slouch down. Just by directing my attention there, said something to everybody else. So I'm just bringing that point of how even how other people receive it, people are seeing that. That's amplified dramatically by rallies. I've been in rallies myself where I have listened to people that later I listened to like on tape, and I'm like, why was I excited? But in the rally, I just got caught up in the excitement. Everybody else was yelling, I'm yelling too. Yeah, we're all just yelling. But all of those things are kind of adding towards it. I was going to share one quick story about that, but I'll save that for next week. So that's where we're going to. We're going to that last part of, and again, there's so many things I would have wanted to show you that I can't. There's public speeches that I wanted to show you. There's TED Talks, but we just don't have the time. There's a few videos I'll show you next week, but that's kind of where we're bringing that to an end with that. But there's so much more I wish I could share with you, but I'm hoping that this has been valuable, at least for what I've been able to over these weeks.
Very much.
Great.
Definitely that.
Good.
Yeah.
So I will see y'all same time, same place. That'll be our last week, next week this time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Darrell.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. All right. See you guys.